And of course, viewers, yes, we are continuing the talks on the budget because, well, today budget debate resumes at 10 a.m. in the House today. And we're certainly looking forward to hearing more of what the ministers, the various ministers, have to say about their portfolios in the government and how they are going to take the development of Trinidad and Tobago forward. And I know that there are several ministers that may have some things to say in regards to Tobago or the developmental plans that are for Tobago. So we're going to be looking forward to that coming up very soon, or from today, next few days, and so on. But for this morning, we're being joined right now by Mr. Ashworth Jack, the former minority leader in the Tobago House of Assembly. So good morning and welcome to you.
Good morning, Kandace. Good morning to the viewing public. And let me thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to contribute to this very interesting budget discussion.
Certainly. Now, we've had quite a lot said about just the allocation itself. And I mean, I have to start off by getting your take on the allocation.
Okay, I want to start a little differently,
Okay.
just a little differently, because I think for some reason people think that a budget is just a crunching of numbers. But there's a bit more to it than that. A Tobago allocation must be put into perspective in order to arrive at your allocation. And I just want to say that our budget is really your biggest policy statement.
Yes.
That sets out how the government intends to manage for that ensuing period. It also speaks to your short to medium term plans, because a lot of times it set the groundwork for other projects that will last 2 or 3 years. But at least that starts there. And that being said about the biggest policy statement, when you see the 2023 budget, what does it say about the government plan for Tobago? And that we will discuss that in detail. And then there's also the issue where people speak about the 4.03% of the budget, which is the minimum allocation or expectation. How did we arrive at that? And for those of you who don't know, prior to 1996-97, the Act did not speak to how Tobago should be treated. Mr. Robinson, his wisdom, would have had placed in the Tobago House of Assembly Act number 40 of 1996 a number of things, but one thing that did not need a special majority was to speak to the Dispute Resolution Commission, because as you will well know, there was a special majority required to do lawmaking and stuff, which the then opposition said they would not support. But the Dispute Resolution Commission did not need that majority. And what the Dispute Resolution Commission speaks to is that if Tobago is not satisfied with its allocation, then it can trigger, or either parties can trigger the Dispute Resolution Commission. Mr. Charles, as Chief Secretary, the first Chief Secretary, did trigger the Dispute Resolution Commission in 97. It lasted until 2000. So in 2000, the Dispute Resolution came back with a decision that says, hey, this is what we think is the minimum. But what did they base it on? Because it had to be based on something. It was based on Tobago population size, which at the time was 4.03% of the national population. And therefore, for ease, they said, okay, we base it on that. But there are some other things that we need to take into consideration. Act number 40 of 1996 also speaks to, and I want to read section 43 of Act number 40 of 1996. In considering the estimates as submitted by the Chief Secretary, Cabinet shall give due consideration to the financial and developmental needs of Tobago in context of Trinidad and Tobago, and shall allocate financial resources to Tobago as fairly and as practicable. And in determining what is fair and practicable, the following consideration, among others, shall apply. Physical separation of Tobago by sea from the Trinidad and Tobago distinct identity, isolation from the principal national growth centers, absence of the multiplier effects of expenditure and investment, private and public, made in Trinidad, restricted opportunity for employment and career fulfillment, impracticability of participation by the residents of Tobago in the major educational, cultural, sporting facilities located in Trinidad.
Yes.
So apart from the population size, it wanted you to speak to the disadvantage Tobago has by, and not only new disadvantage, but the traditional disadvantage that Tobago had when all the major development take place in Trinidad.
So coming back to then
The question then is,
yes,
did this budget reflect these?
Yes.
And so let's disaggregate the budget. The Tobago had, as I said, about a $50-something million increase. And I'm hearing people touting an increase, but is it real or is it artificial? And so let's deal with that. We had an increase in allocation as it relates to the recurrent expenditure. The recurrent expenditure had to have been increased for a number of reasons. The price of a number of utilities have gone up or
Yes.
projected to go up. The 10% increase in the electricity rate, stuff like that, that have to be funded. The 4% increase in salaries in a number of areas have to be funded. The back pay that goes with that have to be funded. And so these are decisions not taken by the Tobago House of Assembly, but taken by the government. And therefore the government have to fund their decisions. Let's do the other, the development expenditure. Tobago development expenditure was cut by $36 million. It was already low in 2022, but now you have cut an additional $36 million. And there are a number of reasons why that is concerning. Because if you give 264 down from 300, there are a number of other cuts that doesn't look, you don't see it on the surface what's there.
Yes.
For example, if you have to hire staff to do development, which you have to, then there's another 4% cut in your allocation compared to last year. So you're talking about another, it's about $10 million cut. So your real spend have now gone down by another $10 million. So that is a $46 million cut.
And then from my information, that part of that $64 million, a good chunk of that, I think 40 something, is to pay gratuity and some back pay for teachers.
Well, I was coming to that.
Yeah.
So then all those are in that. And then you have a situation where the Assembly, when it took over office in 2021, had an outstanding debt of just over $1 billion.
Yes.
And of course, this debt was made by another administration. And I am sometimes tempted to believe, and not sometimes, I'm tempted to believe that the administration had the blessing of the central government to make these bills in the hope that they will return to office and say, okay, once we return to office, we're going to take care of it. But that did not happen. So this new administration is saddled with $1 billion debt with contractors who need the money. And of course, the person who owes them is the Tobago House of Assembly. And so they don't the Tobago House of Assembly through it, but then there need to be some coming together of the contractors and the Assembly to pressure the government to fund that outstanding balance that I am sure had some concurrence in chalking up, because in the year before the election, the Assembly would have chalked up about, between the January election and the December election, about $600 or $700 million hustling to do projects. And I'm not saying the projects was not a good thing to have done, but the thing is, how were they to be funded? And up to now, we see the downside of that.
And there was no plan laid out at that point in time as to how we would ensure that, knowing that you only get, let me say, about $600 million or less sometimes for
No, it's
developmental.
we've never had
Yes.
600 million. I mean, last year was 300. This year is
Yes.
264. Let's compare that to what have happened in Trinidad. I'm not even looking at the whole Trinidad budget, but let's look at one project, a car park for $160 million. $100 million less than the entire Tobago development budget. And so when you're talking about looking at, and that's why I had to read Section 43, because Section 43 sets out what is supposed to be a common sense approach to allocation. But I think in taking that into consideration, there are a number of things that we have to look at as spin-offs. At the same time that we are arguing about that and looking at a dwindling allocation for development, we are seeing that the government have borrowed in the last 8 years $150 billion to do projects in Trinidad and Tobago. They have taken from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund another $1.9 billion. So that's about 13 billion TT. So you're talking about in the vicinity of $163 billion to do additional development. The question is, was that to fund the budget or is that to do other development? Majority of that is to do other development. If that is so, let's even look at the principle of the 4%. If Tobago got 4% of that, then you're talking about 6 point something, nearly $7 billion to fund Tobago development. We know that did not happen. And so what you're having is a widening of the gulf in terms of development between Tobago and Trinidad, whereas Tobago is historically underfunded. Trinidad have more than enough money to fund their development, the Choco Highway, the Point 14 Highway, you name them. And one might say, okay, when there's the airport in Tobago, fine. What is the cost of that? Does that cover the 7 point something billion dollars difference? So those things, as Tobagonians, and I think people need to get away from the politics of the moment and look at where it leaves Tobago in terms of its development and our future children, that kind of stuff.
And we're going to get a bit more into that conversation, but we got to take a quick break. So viewers, please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Wake up with Kandace and Denise. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. On Tobago Updates, viewers, we are continuing our conversation this morning with former minority leader Mr. Ashworth Jack as we discuss some of the things that were coming out of the budget. Now, I want to move slightly away from the specific Tobago allocation, but to deal with something that very much affects the way we do business, where the economy runs and everything like that in Tobago, and that has to do with foreign exchange. And I bring this point up because the minister did make a few mention of a few things in the budget, stating that, for businesses, there would be a facility set up. And this is, of course, coming on the heels of some banks taking the decision to reduce the amount that people can use their credit cards for on international transactions because there is a shortage of foreign exchange in the country. But on the flip side, we see a budget that, even though it had the word diversification in its theme, the budget does not focus on diversification. It remains reliant on the energy sector, and is not really treating with the different ways that we can generate revenue from other areas. So, Mr. Jack, so one thing that the minister did not treat with is that we had a lot of foreign exchange coming into the country, but we didn't see anywhere where it went.
No,
any accountability where that was concerned.
That's easy, if you want to see where our foreign exchange goes, look at the drug trade. The drugs are only sold in US dollars. Yet we have more drugs coming into the country than before. And yet businesses have less access to foreign exchange. So we know that there's an underground trade going somewhere, and that a lot of foreign exchange goes through that. But if the minister is serious about foreign exchange, I found it laughable that you actually ignored Tobago request for money.
Yes.
Totally ignored it. And
In
then,
fact, he wished you luck.
oh, no, and just about to say that. And then smirkingly said to Tobago, I know you want all these things, but good luck. Show me one project that have been proposed by the Tobago House of Assembly that the minister funded. Not one. And so there's an argument taking place by a couple of companies in Tobago. Tobago did set up a lot of companies, but I don't know if they were set up to make money. TATCO is one of them. Spell is another one. There are a number of those that need to be reviewed. I'm looking on with interest as TATCO attempt to revamp and to bring a new kind of leadership and stuff to their company. And my question to everyone in this island is, show me one company in Tobago that made money from the day it was set up to today. You have a dwindling real budget. Yet you're telling me that I must be able to fund all these companies that are losing money. Where does the money come from to do that? I looked at the agricultural sector, and I know, of course, which TATCO falls under. And I noticed that not one project, as outlined by the Division of Agriculture, was funded in this budget. Not one. TATCO is in the red. And so what have saved TATCO a bit this year, in the last year, is the bringing back on stream the capital of Prada that had been down for 5 years.
And that's actually been bringing in foreign exchange.
Exactly. And so I know that they want to buy additional vessels because they want to increase the fleet for fishing. Was that funded? Not a cent. But yet, what had happened when the original TATCO was set up is all the companies, 3 or 4 companies, was just dumped into one. And therefore, anybody who understands business will know at some point you had to review it. I'm hoping that the review will take place in such a way that it doesn't disadvantage too many people. But there are some people that are going to be disadvantaged, but I'm hoping that at the very minimum will be disadvantaged. And that it is set up in such a way to make money, so that when it makes money, it could help to fund some of the other developmental needs of Tobago.
Yeah.
Similarly, Spell, which I happen to be chairman of, in taking over the chairmanship of Spell, I was blown out of the water by the inefficiency of the company. And the inefficiencies of the companies now are forcing us to do some stuff that we have to cut back. We have to look at how we do management, because the management there was non-existent. We also need to look at how we spend, because as a result of a lack of foreign exchange, we have to go through companies in Trinidad which increase their price by as much as 150% by the time it comes to us. Whereas if we had our own foreign exchange, we could have gone directly to the dealers in wherever, France in case of Nordberg, the United States in the case of Cedar Rapids. And we could have purchased these parts ourselves. I would have paid the same price that the people in Trinidad are paying. But in our case, we have to now go through.
And I mean, just as a setup, to bring a little bit more understanding, you need the foreign exchange to purchase the equipment to be able to produce more, to bring in
foreign exchange, and that was coming to, And the thing about that is that once you do that, you will save money. So Spell will save money by paying about 50 or 60% of what it's paying today for a lot of the parts. But Spell had a loan that was a 2-part loan, part US, part TT. We are almost finished paying our TT part of the loan. It's a loan I met there, but it matures in November.
Yeah.
But for more than 2 years, FCB have refused to give Spell any money, to pay the 6,000 or 7,000 US on the US part of the loan.
And then how was that now affected the business of Spell?
Of course. So now we have a situation where the repayments on the loan at the end of November should be 150,000 US dollars. We have a 20,000 US dollars penalty for late payment of the loan. But the only way we can get foreign exchange is if we have an export license, so we could export something that is in demand all over. We also want to find ourselves in a position we can buy a new plant, call for foreign exchange, in order to, and we will be able to be a net earner of foreign exchange for Trinidad and Tobago. So Tobago won't have to depend as heavily on the foreign exchange coming in from the energy sector in Trinidad uh, for our foreign exchange. And all we are saying is that, and that's why I started off by talking about the budget being a policy statement as to where you want to take an island or a country. And in this case, we are seeing clearly that there is no plans to allow Tobago to free itself in order to become self-sufficient, even in the areas that people are knocking your door down to become self-sufficient in. People are saying, we want to buy material, we want to do this. But in order to do the basic thing to set it up, you're waiting for months for a blasting license, you're waiting for months for a mining license, you're waiting for years for an export license. And these things will help the country, but it also makes Tobago a lot more self-sufficient. But what does that do? If that happens, it takes away the argument from Trinidad that Trinidad is funding Tobago, because it gives Tobago a new lease, a new sense of independence. And when you look at the number of other things, you know, development sometimes acts like a rolling article down a hill. It picks up everything as it goes. So once you get the ball rolling, there are going to be other opportunities that present themselves that bring foreign exchange and do a number of stuff. The downstream that we're looking at, there are a number of things that we can do in Tobago, but it needs that initial injection of capital, and we become over time less dependent. Then there's another situation that another mention have been made of, and it's back to the energy sector. Tobago, the gas finds outside of Tobago is in the vicinity of 3 point something trillion with a T cubic meters of gas, right? Nobody is saying how that is going to benefit Tobago, because we're hearing the argument, well, it's Trinidad and Tobago. And so there's a Ministry of Energy in Trinidad. Could you imagine if it was the opposite?
I mean, and technically, the argument could be said that even if Tobago gets 1% of that,
I said, you know, in pointing out my direction, I'm saying gas is sold in US dollars. Let's say that you're getting sometimes four something US per cubic meter. Take into consideration development costs and all that. And we in Tobago probably have been too kind. And I just want to continue along the kind road. And we said, okay, let's say it's $4. So it's about $26, $27.
yeah,
Give us $1. $1. It means that over the 30 or so years that this contract is in place, Tobago will end up with about $3.4 trillion. And somebody said, well, a lot. No, is it too much to ask? It's ours. The gas finds in our space. And we are saying, yes, all we want, we take into consideration the development costs, we take all that. Give us $1 TT of that. But it also says to me, what is happening in terms of training and all that? How many Tobagonians are being prepared? Is the Tobago Assembly sent a list of what kind of skills would be needed so that they can start to prepare young Tobagonians? Because you're going to have a social problem. The social problem will come from people seeing either the pipeline go down the road or tankers going down the road, and Tobagonians are in the same place as it was before the trillions of dollars of gas were extracted from its space.
yes,
And I've said this before, but it is worth repeating. The real reason for the building of the road into Toku and for the port in Toku has nothing to do with Trinidad. It has to do with the gas that they intend to put down the facilities and that will then feed onto the platforms. Those platforms, a lot of food, a lot of water, and a lot of things goes onto those platforms. And if you don't have the necessary facility to be going to the ports, it means have to be taken from somewhere.
Yeah.
The question is, would there be a plant in Togo that takes the gas from Tobago and to then go to international? So all those things. And while that is happening, we're arguing with each other about if you had 300 million last year, what you do with it? When you look at the people have to understand, when somebody allocate 160 million for a car park, they understand, hey, this is going to be costly. When for that, the traffic changes advance sign, what do you call the country? Nearly $1 billion?
Yeah.
I didn't hear us arguing about that. But when you look at a number of things happening in Tobago have been traditionally underfunded prior to.
Actually, the only major project that's being funded in Tobago is at airport.
Airport.
And funny enough, I made I made a point is that you're spending you allocated $400 million for the airport construction in Tobago for it to be completed, but it's actually more than what Tobago got on a whole for its developmental budget.
Everything else put together,
Yeah.
And it's because you are controlling the development of the airport. The THA can't even go on the airport, and yet the law says that airports and seaports are the responsibility of the Tobago House Assembly. But you have to look good. So you say, okay, I as minister have responsibility for the airport, because I think that falls under the Ministry of Finance. I have responsibility for it. My government, I have to have something to boast about when the next election comes around. So I'm making sure that it gets funded, and I'm funding this to the tune of $136 million, more than the rest of Tobago's development. I mean, something is wrong with that. The thinking is warped. And then you smokingly tell Tobago, that's good luck.
And then there's also the thing where tourism. We see the success. It's not that we haven't seen the success. We see the success of tourism and the potential of tourism, and how that could even complement the energy industry we have and the manufacturing industry we have in both islands. But yet we continue to fail to put money or investment behind it from a governmental standpoint.
Kandace, I think you're peeping. Interesting. I want to come to this issue. We have a situation where there are thousands of Trinidadians every day looking to come to Tobago, especially on the weekends, long weekends. They can't get a flight. Yet you're telling Tobago, do better in tourism. Every means of entering Tobago is controlled by Trinidad. The boat is controlled out of Port of Spain. The planes are controlled out of Port of Spain. So we have no say. But let me tell you how people are not genuine. Look around the Caribbean for all the carnivals that have taken place around the Caribbean this year. Caribbean Airlines had a common theme: welcome home.
Yes.
And they did additional flights. They did all kinds of things even for the Guyana for the cricket. They call it a cricket carnival or something like that. Additional flights to go to Guyana, to Barbados, to St. Lucia. St. Kitts and Nevis now have flights out of. But you're cutting back on the number of flights. You have cut back on the number of flights in Tobago. But you want Tobago to compete with those areas that you are taking the resources from that should be pumped into Tobago. Because tourism jumpstart is not as simple as people think. It calls for a lot of spending. To advertise internationally is US dollars or pounds or euros, as the case may be. Conferences are extremely expensive, but you have to go in order to meet with people. There's the airport that you need to bring in flights. And in the case of the Caribbean, only 2 islands in the Caribbean doesn't pay for flights. That is Jamaica and Trinidad. Everybody else have to help the airlines. But yet there's no allocation for that. And in fact, TTL budget has been cut by about either $3 or so million.
Wow.
Right? So everywhere you see Tobago can make an impact that if when settled, that is, the allocation has been reduced. And it makes me wonder if this is not a deliberate attempt to keep Tobago dependent.
And well, that's unfortunately the point where we'll have to leave our conversation this morning because we are unfortunately out of time. But I want to thank you so much, Mr. Jack, for being here with us and for being able to put some of those numbers into perspective, because it isn't just about the numbers, but it's also about the policies and the plans going forward and how we are going to take the development of both Trinidad and Tobago forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Finley.
All right, viewers, so please don't go anywhere. Got a lot more coming up for you on the program. So we'll see you after the break. The energy fill the skies.